We don't need a trophy to know that we're winners.
I don't know, that sounds an awful lot like something losers say to make themselves feel better for not having that sweet, juicy trophy. I prefer my meaningless platitude. You're a winner by watching the 26th episode of the all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers. Once again, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is forcing us to skip around. It's not nearly as big a skip as the Hatchosaurus' surprise Season 2 return we covered last time. That said, future Black Ranger Adam Park does make a surprise early bird cameo here.
I'm a frog.
However, Swordswoman Japan's Best is another episode MMPR skipped over in its original 40, only coming back to it in 1994 during its Zhu 2 era. Because of that, both of these episodes end up being the 44th installments of their respective shows. How fun! When we last had to dip into the post-Zyurangers Season 1 episodes, I said they're the ones I'm most nostalgic for, as they hit that sweet spot of still having the original cast and having had enough time to get past the show's early growing pains. So, how does this one hold up? At first blush, Lions and Blizzards seems pretty strong. It has a fun premise, that of the Rangers competing against Bulk, Skull, and Angela in the Oddball games. It's a creative premise allowing for some funny and messy action scenes, as well as giving some of the recurring characters a chance to shine. Billy gets to show off how far he's come as a fighter in a pretty good putty fight, and even Ron Wasserman's music gets more of a chance to tickle our ear holes. The post-Zyuranger episodes of Season 1 are when the show starts using vocal insert songs, which I always felt left a big impression as well as an air of legitimacy. Real shows have real songs, right? In this instance, it's a song called Fight, which is pretty good. After months of episodes showing Zack chasing Angela, Angela asks Zack on a date. Wow, we have a recurring plotline going somewhere? On the surface, this episode seems like it could compete pretty well against its Zyuranger counterpart. Then I started noticing certain things. Why does Angela ask Zack on a date? What motivates her, and what does that contribute to the episode? Rita makes her Gotan monster out of the Noble Lion trophy given to the winner of the Oddball games, so I figured there must be a statue or trophy in the Zyuranger episode, like in The Park Where Demons Dwell. Nope. So why does Rita need a statue to make a monster? She has a guy for that. Oh no, do the Oddball games only exist to kill time? What's the point of Bulk and Skull stealing the statue? Just so the Rangers can follow them, so Rita needs to distract them by sending down putties? Which means the putty fight is just killing time? When Zack shows up to save the other Rangers from Gotan, I noticed something odd with his gloves. Were they torn? What is that? What's that thing? That seems like a pretty important detail. Why is the magic lamp from switching places visible in the command center in one shot? Well, that's just because they're reusing footage, but I wanted to mention it. Shut up. I had a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that this might not hold up for comparison after all. And after I watched Swordswoman Japan's Best, I totally understood why. First, let's look at the monster. Like so many of the Zyuranger monsters, it's based off of Greek mythology. This time, it's the Chimera, given its combined lion and goat traits. Surprisingly, Power Rangers actually acknowledges that, having Alpha refer to Gotan at one point as a chimera. Zyuranger is a bit more on the nose, with its actual name being Dora Chimera. Yep, I'm just gonna leave all those disparate pronunciations right where I found them. I don't Greek. But you get the point. Appearances aside, the monster this time around has powers that I couldn't find any mythological association with, which is fine. I do find it interesting, however, that both shows focus on somewhat different things. To be fair, Zyuranger plants the seeds for what Power Rangers does. Dora Chimera uses tornadoes to kidnap people. Going into the final battle, it starts snowing, seemingly at random, and hey, the resulting snow fight is certainly one of the most creative I've seen so far. But was that even related to the monster? I honestly don't know. Power Rangers certainly think so, tying those elements together to mean that Gotan's goal is to disrupt the weather in Angel Grove, Something I'm still not sure if Dora Kimira can do.
Well, damn, Jackie, I can't control the weather.
And I give Power Rangers credit for that. There's only so much they can do with the footage, but the Snowbound finale feels a little less random here. And Power Rangers throwing in a tornado scene means I get to experience Billy's and Trini's cute wet weather outfits. I love them! Still, in doing this, they completely skip over what Dora Kimira is all about. Bandora creates this monster not to screw around with weather, but to use its tiny tornadoes to suck up talented people, performers and athletes that children look up to. And that leads us to Yamazaki Sayaka, a kendo expert who is a bit more adept at fighting back against Dora Kimira than its other victims. Still though, she might need some help from Goushi, who has identified her as the next victim and insists on protecting her. But it's pretty obvious from the outset that his interest in her goes a bit beyond that. So we don't have a Kid of the Week. This episode is very much a romance instead. And that's good because the kids we do see this week are terrible, terrible actors. But it was about at this point I began to understand the struggles I had noticed in Power Rangers. This is less a typical episode of Zyuranger than it is a historical romance melodrama. I will stand out in the rain and wait for you all night. I'll show my appreciation by giving you my umbrella. The monster has possessed you, but I will stand firm and beg for you to remember your true self. I'll never give up on you. I don't care how many fake blood packets I must squeeze with my hands. No, I hurt you. I'll rip my own scarf to dress your wounds. Please, please don't go, my love. You're too injured. You'll never survive. No, I must go and help my friends. I can't bear it. This episode goes so incredibly hard, and I love it for that. Does it earn such high stakes? Arguably not. The performances do a surprisingly good job selling this whirlwind romance with a character we're never going to see again, but it's almost certainly not going to be enough for an audience to totally buy just how heavy this is. Still, the show commits to it so unflinchingly that it kinda works. But you can see the problems here, right? Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is certainly not going to do such heavy melodrama. It's just not that kind of show. At best, they'll let Tommy and Kimberly make the occasional goo-goo eyes at each other, but they're afraid if they go too long without blaring rock guitars, the American kids will tune it out. Whew, that was a sharper cut than that sword. Even ignoring the tone though, there are a lot of structural issues that clash with Power Rangers. This episode is not just Goushi-centric, it's almost Goushi-exclusive. The other Zyurangers don't even appear until about 2/3 of the way through the episode. There isn't any transformed fight footage to use until about 3/4 of the way through. Even its big visual, that of Goushi's bandaged gloves, can't be focused on because they're bloody, and I'm almost certain Power Rangers couldn't show blood. I can see why MMPR didn't bother adapting this one initially, and I'm kinda surprised they went back to it at all. That said, I don't think it would have been impossible to do this well within the confines of Power Rangers. In fact, what's so depressing about this to me is that they rewrote this in a way that could have resulted in a huge improvement over its Zyuranger counterpart, but for some reason, they didn't go all the way. In fact, they seem to go in all the wrong ways. For an episode that really had to scrape together usable footage, I can't understand why they didn't use the scenes where Bandora discusses her plans with her monster. I was shocked to see this existed in Zyuranger because Power Rangers uses and reuses the most generic footage of the bad guys to get across the same basic concepts. I'm not saying using this scene would have magically improved the episode or anything, it's just odd that they didn't when it's right there. But I guess having Rita belt out nonsense incantations for the 10th time is just more interesting. And at any rate, using those scenes might have required giving the monster more of a presence and a motivation. Remember, Power Rangers skips over the monster's entire premise. It doesn't just absorb people, but their abilities too. They still include examples of it, like archery that can outshoot Kimberly, but it's just stuff he can do. As an aside, I really wish Dora Kimaira had done some singing during the fight. He had to have taken that idol for some reason after all. But Power Rangers chose to invent the oddball games for this episode, something that has no Zyuranger equivalent. Gee, that sure sounds like an absolutely perfect setting to gather together people who have interesting abilities, doesn't it? Introduce a couple of competitors with skills that Goten absorbs. Suddenly the conceit the episode is based around actually ties into something. And since the Rangers are competing, it draws them into the story naturally, rather than them just showing up randomly like the Zyurangers do. Doesn't seem like too big of a leap to make. I'm not bragging that I'm some kind of genius here for noticing this. The pieces are all right there. Just put them together. Think about this for a second. Everybody complains that Zyuranger focuses more on its guest stars than its heroes. But that's not true here. Sayaka is an interesting character, but given that she's possessed by the monster for a big portion of it, this is very much Goushi's episode. It's his crush, his melodramatic conflict, his hope, his injuries. The other Zyurangers only fight without him because he's so wounded that he needs them to save him. Again, I don't expect Power Rangers to necessarily do the same thing, but when given an opportunity to focus an episode around Zack as a character, Power Rangers instead follows the Tommy model. Zack isn't around because he can't hear his communicator because he's at a movie with Angela. That's not writing an episode about Zack, that's writing him out of the show. In Zyuranger, Goushi is the one summoning the Guardian Beasts and calling all the shots because he's the one who's emotionally invested, who's making a grand last stand. This is his conflict. It doesn't make any sense why Zack gets that privilege here. He's just the guy who slept through his alarm and has no idea what's going on. Here's another chance Power Rangers had to improve upon its Japanese counterpart by tying together an element they were already using. Remember I said that Zyuranger's biggest weakness is in trying to speed date a romance out of a single episode character. But Power Rangers has Angela, a recurring romantic interest that Zack has been trying to woo all season. This episode uses Angela. She's literally already here. This could have easily resonated more strongly just by virtue of audience familiarity. But they don't do anything with it except to have Zack's Ranger duties interrupt his date. And that could have been interesting, but it's not. Zack makes the excuse that his communicator is his popcorn alarm, which is admittedly funny. Once the threat is over, Zack returns to the movie with 2 buckets of popcorn. And without saying anything, Angela dumps her bucket on his head and leaves, the implication being that he was gone for a very long time. And I get the joke. It's really the only tonally appropriate payoff you could have. And I'm about to overthink this comedy bit in a children's show to an unfair degree, but stay with me for a second. The fight at the end of the episode is ridiculously short. In real time, he's gone about 4 minutes. Even with the most generous time dilation I could grant it, Zack couldn't have been away for more than half an hour. The movie isn't even over, for crying out loud. So what's Angela supposed to be this mad about? Zack came back. He came back with popcorn, just like he said he would. If I was Angela, I'd be confused it took so long, sure, but I'd probably be worried the guy had really bad irritable bowel syndrome or some other embarrassing medical malady. You already went to the trouble of building a lobby set, so have Zack return only to find Angela angrily waiting in the lobby because the movie ended an hour ago. She looked for him at the concession stand, but he wasn't there. You could still have the exact same popcorn dunk ending, but at least her over-the-top reaction would make some sense. So, why did I just spend all that time overanalyzing a really stupid joke in a show for babies? Because the problem this illustrates is that Angela isn't a character. She's just a prop. Angela dresses all sultry and asks Zack out on a date, something that rightly shocks everybody. It's completely out of character. What turned her around on him when she's spent all season treating him like the incessant stalker that he is? Just because he helped her out of the mud? It doesn't make any sense. Unless, perhaps, Rita's latest monster had possessed her in order to lure Zack into a trap? You know, like the monster in Zyuranger did? That might have been interesting, might have inspired a unique action scene, might have wrung some drama out of Zack's long-standing crush. Or it could have played out the way it does here. Angela lures him to a movie to weaken the Power Rangers. Zack leaves and saves the day, but unbeknownst to him, it frees Angela from her mind control. He returns to a very confused girl who dumps popcorn on this pushy guy who insists he's on a date with her. You go that route, and you suddenly don't have to explain why Angela's actions don't make any sense. Her not making sense would be the point. But no, Angela is a device programmed to suddenly come onto Zack when the show needs her to, and to just as suddenly push him away when it needs her to. And even then, it's servicing the plot less than if she had a cohesive motivation. That's why this ending joke just kills me. Everything they needed was already there. You had it, Power Rangers. You had it right in the palms of your hands. Instead, Angela acts like a slot machine who spits out random results instead of a person who makes decisions based on her experiences and preferences. As such, it's impossible to care whether or not Zack successfully courts her because all that effort, all that connection could be undone by a single stubborn poop. Let's score these, although I don't know how much pretense I can put up here. For story, I do have to point out that Zyuranger ends its episode so quickly that it never explains what happens to all the people Dora Chimera absorbed. Even Power Rangers has Zordon explain the noble lion statue was destroyed. Are all those people dead? Somebody should have said so then.
I regret your people was destroyed.
See? Easy. That aside, Power Rangers, as is so frequent, struggles to present a singular story. Instead, it has half a dozen incomplete things. There's a competition that ends halfway through the episode. There's a largely unresolved subplot about Bulk and Skull stealing the trophy. There's a tacked-on message about not needing a trophy to prove you're winners. There's a disappointing and predictable payoff to a running gag. And Rita's weather plan is so dangerous that it produces a tornado watch. Not even a warning, just a watch. My biggest disappointment is that Ernie evacuates everybody to the basement. Call me weird, but I really wanted to see Ernie's basement. For that, and for everything else I've said throughout the rest of the video, but mostly that, Zyuranger wins. For characters, this is the category I typically expect Power Rangers to have the edge in. After all, Zack has some amazingly corny lines.
She's a baby source.
But I was shocked I say, to see Goushi break out of his stoic professional #1 role and demonstrate some real humanity. There's a wonderful bit of staging where Goushi starts to reach for Sayaka's hand, but then stops himself and grabs his dino buckler instead, thus choosing duty over love. Sayaka is likewise pretty fun and engaging, even if I am disappointed that by the end, she's reduced to nothing but crying, and crying, and crying, and still crying over this guy she just met. Still, I'll take it over unmotivated popcorn assault. Zyuranger wins. For action, I can't minimize how effective and fun the fight scene in Power Rangers is, the already impressive fight buoyed up by Fight the Song. There are some hilarious sequences of them running the footage backwards to make it look like, for example, Trini literally throwing a putty up a slide. She is pretty strong. Still, as cheesy and melodramatic as it is, I love the sword fight sequence. What am I saying? The fact that it's cheesy and melodramatic isn't a bug, it's a feature! Zyuranger wins! It's a clean sweep. Are you really surprised? I gotta tell you, it might not seem like it, but I really was rooting for Power Rangers this time. I thought it was going to take me to places I wanted to be. I had high apple pie in the sky hopes. But if there's anything more disappointing than an episode that never had a chance at being good, it's one that was so close to being amazing but missed the mark so hard that it completely fell apart. If only. Well, that's what I get for believing in things. Besides, like I said when I covered The Green Candle, I like me some romance. Romance with swords? Even better! But there are still a few episodes left, so be sure to check back when we again pick up with Mighty Morphin Zyurangers. Thanks for watching. Hope you had fun. I will see you next time.